Hi everybody, welcome to the ISSU Instagram Live Q&A with Minister Norma Foley. I'd like to thank everyone for coming on. I'm sure there are many students who are logging on to watch us all, and I'm sure there are many students or teachers or even principals watching in today. So welcome to everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Ruben Murray. I'm the president of the Irish Second Level Students Union. For those of you who are not aware, the Irish Second Level Students Union, or the ISSU, we are the national representatives of students. I'm joined tonight with our education officer, Alicia O'Sullivan. We are elected at the annual assembly every year to represent students. And of course, joining us tonight is Minister Norma Foley. I'll hand over to my co-host, Alicia O'Sullivan, to introduce herself, and then we'll move on to Minister. Alicia.
Thanks, Ruben, and thanks everyone for joining us, and particularly to the Minister as well. I suppose my name is, just to say, Alicia O'Sullivan, and I'm the Education Officer at ISSU. I'm the National Student Executive. I suppose we're here tonight because it's been an extremely stressful year for students, stressful probably being an extreme understatement. And we've come to, ISSU have advocated and successfully lobbied for students to receive a version of calculated grades, which this year is called an SEC accredited grade, and the choice to sit as many or as little exams as they wish. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to answer some of the questions that students have been asking us a lot on our Instagram and through email and at our town hall last Sunday. And we're going to continue to work to ensure that students have as much clarity as they can at all times.
Thank you, Alicia. Now, of course, welcome, Minister Foley. It's a delight to have you on. Thank you very much. And before we move on, we're hoping to work with you tonight to try to bring some clarity to students and so they can understand the situation. It's a great place we're in now, but of course, there's always more questions that come with it. Before we go in, do you want to say any opening remarks or anything you'd like to say? Minister, I'm afraid you're muted.
Thank you. Well, I suppose, Ruben, in the first instance, I would very much so like to say a sincere thank you for the invitation, both to you and to Alicia. And I would also like to acknowledge, Alicia has referenced it, these past few months, and I would say even longer than that, really since fifth year, it's been a tremendously difficult and challenging time for students. It's been a difficult and challenging time for all of society, but I do believe it has been particularly so for students, and I'm very conscious of the, I suppose, the loss of time in fifth year and the additional loss of time in January, February for the class of 2021. So with that in mind, I know students were very anxious that there would be clarity and that there would be choice around the Leaving Certificate 2021. And I think we are now in a position, since we've made that announcement some time ago, that is exactly where we are. And our achievement in reaching to that point is very much an achievement of the advisory group that worked very, very closely with the Department of Education. And I specifically want to acknowledge all of those who were involved in that advisory group, and that's representatives of parents, teachers, managerial bodies, and many others, and of course, you the students. And I would like to say on a personal level that both Ruben and Alicia have been absolutely tremendously hardworking, dedicated and determined representatives on your behalf. And I think that is right and proper. I very much value the place of the student voice in education. I come from a background of working in education for all of my working life, really, and I have worked on an ongoing basis with students, and I do firmly believe that students are at the heart of all that we wish to and seek to achieve in education. So it is only right and proper that students were represented at the very highest level of discussion and debate and engagement. And I would particularly like to acknowledge the two representatives that you have in Alicia and Ruben, in that when they came to the table, and there was many opportunities to come to the table, there were late nights and early mornings and weekend work and everything else, but they never shied away from it. But they always came with the concerns and the views of students and the difficulties and challenges that students might be facing. But to your credit, you also came with proposals and solutions and a very thought-provoking agenda. And I particularly want to acknowledge even your latest initiative, which was your survey, which was just a tremendous body of work, but really gave, I suppose, a remarkable insight from a student point of view to the table and to everybody gathered around the table. And so just to acknowledge really that I think you have demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt, not just in this process this year, but in the previous process as well, the importance of having the student voice at the heart of all that we do. And I want to congratulate you and thank you for that, and look forward long into the future to there being, you know, capable and articulate student voice as we have experienced in the last couple of years. So thank you to you both and to all that you have done for the student voice.
Thank you, Minister. That actually means a lot. So thank you very much for your kind words. I suppose I think another important thing is there has been a lot of work done by the department as well. And more importantly, at the end of the day, there was choice, there was clarity, and there was compassion shown to students. So I think it is very important to recognise that, and that students have been given that choice. And so I do want to say thank you on that point. Now, tonight we hope to cover 4 general areas. First off, of course, the accredited grades, there's a lot of questions surrounding students. Equally, the written exams, how that is going to work for students. And then, of course, the return to school, something that is not just affecting 6th years, but 5th years, and so on and so forth. And finally, we have a final question around student voice. So if we just start off straight into accredited grades, one, as we saw coming up, is the orals and coursework. One question is, students, if I just choose to take accredited grades, I don't choose to sit the written exams, do those students have to sit an oral exam, and do they have to finish the coursework if they just avail of accredited grades?
No, the orals and coursework are specifically for the students who are opting to take the written exams, and that's important. And as you would be aware, the oral exams will be overseen by the State Examinations Commission. There will be external markers for that. So it is the orals and practicals and all that are just for the students who are choosing to take the written exams in June.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Minister. Now, the next question, equally, while those students who are just taking accredited grades, they don't have to sit the written exams, they don't have to do their orals, practicals, or finish the coursework. But school isn't over, and there is still work to do between now and the end of the year. So if you want to explain that a little bit, just to contextualize that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a very important question, in that really, we're very, very aware of the amount of time that has been lost in terms of learning. And it is for that reason, as I said earlier, and when I say learning, I mean in-person learning, because I want to acknowledge there was also enormous work went into providing remote opportunity for students. And I absolutely want to acknowledge that schools have done and continue to do, for many of those that are still availing of it and have to avail of it, tremendous work in the area of provision of remote learning for students. But specifically for the Leaving Certificate class, there was a significant loss of in-person experience of education. So for that reason, we're very conscious, as I said, that there would be choice, but equally so that learning gap would be, I suppose, lessened on the return to school. So for example, students are back at school now, and we're encouraging students to complete your courses, to complete your learning, to engage fully, to be very proactive and active in your learning, and so that you can give, I suppose, the best of yourself, really, whether you choose to take the accredited grade or whether you choose to take the written exam. It's very important for the accredited grade that you would continue to engage and that you would continue to be learning, because we'll say the accredited grade, the final date, if you like, for assessment for the accredited grade is the 14th of May. So there is a lot of learning still to be done and a lot of work still to be done. So for you to be the best version of yourself and to achieve the highest grade that you can achieve, either in the written exams or indeed in the accredited grade, then you should very much so keep working, keep studying, keep at it.
Thanks, Minister. The next question we have is quite an important one. We've got a lot, and actually came up a lot as well in our town hall event last Sunday. The question is, what information can a teacher use to form the accredited grade or help form the accredited grade, and what information can they not include? And I suppose with particular attention to the mock exams as well.
Well, I suppose, to be fair, I outline really what can be included, and that really then anything else we're saying is out of it. So what can be included really is all the different forms of learning and assessment that would have taken place over these 2 years. We say there was uninterrupted learning throughout 5th year up to the month of March, and this past year there has been from September to December, and now hopefully, as we say, from March as we move to May. So, you know, whatever assessment, whatever assignment, whatever presentations, whatever way you were being accredited, all of those aspects can most certainly be part of the work that will be assessed for the accredited grade. And as I say, that does include work that will be ongoing between March and May as well. So assignments, presentations, exams, whatever the case might be, all of that is open for consideration.
If I could just to clarify, Minister, but on what can't be used as information such as peer assessed work, or your socioeconomic background, if you just want to go into that briefly as well, to just put some context into those.
No, as I say, specifically, the only thing that we'd say the estimated mark would be adjudicated on is actually, as I've said, any form of assessment that has taken place, any form of presentation. Like for some people, there might have been presentations done in 5th year or whatever, or tests done, mini tests or bigger tests or whatever. That's the only format on which students will be judged, and that's what will be garnered together by the teachers to eventually to offer their estimated marks.
Yeah, I think it's great that that's clear for students, because I suppose a lot of students were maybe confused about what and what can't be used, and I suppose it's important to mention as well that the department, the SEC, have advised that the mocks are not used in the accredited grades process, if I'm correct on that, Minister.
Well, exactly what it says in the guidelines, and there have been guidelines issued to the school.
Yeah.
Mocks are neither advised nor recommended. They're neither recommended nor advised. And there is also very clearly guidelines where it suggests that the department is of the view that, you know, the maximum amount of time would be given to learning at this point. So the mocks are not advised and they're not recommended, but you know, schools do have autonomy to make their own decisions always in terms of mocks, but that is you know, the view very strongly held by the department.
That's great, thank you. And just the next question I have is, in the guidance as well set out by the SEC, it says that teachers should only use 3 tests in each subject between now and the end of the year. We've been getting reports in the last few days of students being tested quite frequently, even since the return. I'm just wondering, is there any advice you and the department and possibly the SEC would give if students find themselves in this situation? I suppose the purpose being that we would have identified way back before the closure of schools in January that there was a lot of over-assessment happening, and I suppose that sort of guidance is there to try and avoid that situation. So I think the students that have come to us with that sort of issue are find themselves in a position where they're only back in school a few days and they already feel a lot of over-assessment is coming in and it might only get worse. So is there any advice you might give to those students in how to maybe approach that situation or how to deal with it?
Yes, and I'm very conscious, Alicia, that you know, that was an issue that you had both raised very early on in the year, going back, you know, we say almost even the first term. That was something that you had concerns about, and that you had said that students were bringing to your attention. The department is very clear, and in the guidelines it does state that there would be 3 tests. We're talking about March, April, and May. We're conscious that there wouldn't be an over-assessment. We're conscious also, and we have this in the guidelines, that the emphasis would be placed on tuition, and that is what we are advocating for the schools. And I think that, you know, I have every confidence really that you know, there is a very strong awareness amongst staff, and that you know, the emphasis as well is on completing courses and all of that. And so it is the strong recommendation of the department that there would be no more than those 3 assessments, because I'm conscious as well that, you know, students are studying a number of subjects, and you know, so it does all add up. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now on to our next question, student portal. So as we saw last year, there was a student portal where you open up and choose. Now there is a difference this year in that it opens once, but then it opens again, but you can choose to sit exams or not. So if you could explain how that's going to work and the timeline associated with that.
Yeah, you're quite correct, Ruben. As you said, the portal very similar to last year. The portal this year will open up on Wednesday, the 10th of March. and it will remain open until Tuesday, the 16th of March. And it's kind of easy to remember that because it's the day before St. Patrick's Day. So people will know that's the absolute, finishing point. So from the 10th to the 16th. And so when you go into the portal, what you will actually do is you will register and you will create your own account. Then you will confirm your subject and your level. And you will indicate then also at that point on the 10th of March, whether you are opting to take the accredited grade or whether you are opting to take the written exams, or indeed whether you're opting to take both, because you have that choice as well. And, could I say, I suppose, really, you will have another opportunity then, late April, early May, to, if you have a change of mind as regards anything that you have put into the portal at that point. So I suppose really I would be advocating, give yourself every opportunity, give yourself the best opportunity. And, do give great consideration. I know, from discussions with yourselves and that, and with other students, that for many the accredited grades is a very popular option. But I would also say to you that I would encourage you to give every consideration to taking the written exams also. It's a marvelous opportunity to have two opportunities, if you like. So give yourself the maximum opportunity to be the best that you can be. But as I say, it's from the 10th to the 16th of March, and it will open once again late April, early May, so that you have another opportunity if there's anything you want to change. I should actually say as well, just to make things easier for yourself, as you do go to the portal on the 10th of March, you will need your exam number. Students will have an exam number, so you will need your exam number, and you will need a PIN number as well. And the PIN number is usually the first 4 digits of your PPS number, but all of that can be sorted out anyway between now and the 10th. But just flagging it with you.
Great, thanks, Minister. And I suppose we move on now to topic 2, away from topic 1, which was solely the accredited grades process. And I suppose what we're trying to do here is just to clarify the most kind of popular questions that we've received from students. So there's still, as we've seen, a little bit of confusion, even though the guidelines were set out. So maybe the questions we're asking are already in the guidelines, but it's really just to give some I suppose hear it directly from yourself, Minister. So the first question we have on the topic of written exams is, how will orals, projects and practical exams work for students who wish to sit the exam? So do they have to do them or not, essentially?
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Alicia. The students who opt to take the written exams will take all of the other components with it. So, for example, the oral exams will run from the 26th of March to the 15th of April, any time in between that period. And that will be at the discretion of the school as to how they organise it. The 26th will be a Friday, and it is the day of the Easter holidays. And so it will run for the 2 weeks of Easter and then the full week after Easter as well. And the orals should take place either before school or after school or at the weekends or over the holiday period or whatever the school deems appropriate, but it is outside of class time. And just in terms of the coursework, yes, obviously you will still have to complete the coursework and submit it to the SEC. And practicals would say, for example, the music, which I know there has been a lot of queries around. Music will take place in the second week of the Easter holidays, and it will be adjudicated externally by examiners appointed by the SEC. And just to go back to the orals, I should just to give you a further feel for what would happen with the orals. As I said, the orals will take place from the 26th of March to the 15th of April. But the person who will be working with you in terms of the orals and asking the questions could well be a teacher from your own school, or it could be a teacher from the locality or whatever. And the orals will be recorded electronically. And then they will be sent to the SEC, but marked externally. So the person who is interviewing you on the day or whatever is not the person who will be giving you the grade. The grade will be given by the SEC. It will be an external award of marks for the oral.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Minister. And this is another question we got. It might have a very simple answer, but it's just, again, to just get the truth out there, I suppose. If a student opts in to sit one exam or 3 exams or all the exams, and they don't show up for the exam on the day. What happens in that sort of situation?
Okay. Well, I would be hoping, Alicia, that everybody will show up for the written exams, but I take your point, and it is a very good question. And I do think, you know, the more you know in advance, then the stronger position you're in. So if you do sign on, we'll say for the written exams, you don't show up or whatever, you will get the accredited grade, provided obviously that you have signed on for that option of accredited grade. But of course, I would say as well that even if you hadn't signed on and there was an exceptional circumstance, whether, you know, maybe something to do with you had to isolate, there was an illness because of COVID or whatever, if there was an exceptional circumstance, you would of course get the accredited grade. But so that's where we stand with that. But as I say, I would be hopeful that as many people as possible will take the written exams.
Absolutely, and I suppose it's important to say it's kind of the same as every other year. You know, if you don't show up to your exam, nothing essentially happens. You don't get a result in that exam. But this year, I suppose you're fortunate enough, if you have opted into the accredited grade, you will get a result for said subject. So,
but isn't that an interesting point, Alicia, that everybody should then opt in for the accredited grade? I think there's a little bit of perhaps advice and learning in that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think at least if you're going to sit all the exams, you have kind of a backup there, and there's no real harm in opting into the accredited grades process, I suppose, or no con really if you're going to sit or not. The next question I have is another one regarding the morning of the exam, I suppose, whether you decide to go or not. This one is if you can change your mind about the subject level. So I suppose in normal years, normal circumstances, you could go in. If you were sitting in higher level, I suppose this would be the most common situation. You may decide to drop to lower level or foundation level even the morning of your exam. So will that be possible this year or not?
Yes, it will be possible. But just to make it very, very clear so that students would be aware, in terms of the accredited grade process, you know, when you would say go into the portal on any time between the 10th of March and the 16th of March, you will also have to identify or confirm your subject and confirm your level. Now, this is for the accredited grade, okay? And if you decide then to change your mind, we'll say late April, early May, you can do that in relation to the level. But that's the only time that you can change the level for the accredited grade, because you will have had between March, we'll say, and the end of April or early May, okay? And once that decision is made, then the second time in the portal, that's done for the accredited grade and you can't change. But as regards to the written exam that you referenced, yes, on the morning, you can change. That's I suppose a concession that has always been there under normal circumstances as well, that students do change their mind on the morning of the exam, and you will have that opportunity as well this year in June, should you so wish. But I suppose now this is the teacher in me, I would say to you, just don't lose confidence in yourself though, you know. I would often be fearful that students would, maybe it's out of anxiety or whatever, or lack of confidence, that they might change on the day. So don't doubt yourself. If you put the work in and you know, you signed for a particular level, you did that for a very good reason. So just, you know, give it the best of consideration before you would do something like that on the morning of the exam.
Thank you,
of course, at the end of the day, no one knows better than yourself, so you make the decision yourself. But yeah.
Thank you, Minister. Now, an important point that has come out in the guidelines is that earlier in the year, there was extra choice provided on the papers for students. And there was a relook at that in January. But moving forward, there is going to be changes made to the paper to reduce the workload on students. So if you just want to explain that and what that would look like briefly.
Well, really what we're talking about there, Ruben, is we'd say the length of the exam would remain the same, but generally speaking, it is that there would be greater choice for students, you know, so maybe there would be, you know, the same number of questions, but less to be done, but you would still have the maximum time that would be the traditional time on the paper. So that's what we're working through currently.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think an important thing to note is for anyone listening, there is work to be done between now. The initial guidelines have been out. There is a lot of still details to work through. we at the ISSU, we are engaged with the department in trying to contribute to that. So that's just an important point, I think, for us to.
But another interesting point as well, I suppose, just to make, Ruben, is that in terms of accommodation on the paper, we were very conscious, even at the start of the year in September when people came back, we were very conscious of the time that had been lost in the previous summer, that there was March, April and May, that there was quite a period of time lost there. So accommodations had been made already on the paper and advised to schools, and it's on the website and that had been done in advance of Christmas. So those accommodations and considerations for students as regards the exams, were already there. So we are building on that now going forward, but I would want students to be aware that, we had already made accommodation in that regard.
Of course, the choice is actually on top of choice that was already made. So I think that is very right for that. Now, the other point now is around projects. We see that students who do want to sit the exams, they have to complete their project component. And I suppose there's a question is will there be, is there any look at extending the sort of deadlines that are being faced for those projects coming up?
Oh yes, absolutely, very much so. I do know that project deadlines are very, very worrying, and they can be, they're just times of high intensity to just try and get everything done for a particular deadline. And we were very conscious as well that there would be latitude in the dates that we did set. And so now those deadlines, because of, we'll say, the loss of time there in January, February, those deadlines are being extended, and the detail of that was released today. And so I know, for example, there were certain subjects, there was, some that were, we'd say, even due tomorrow or whatever. So I think that was engineering. I think that was due tomorrow or something, a project, and that now has been extended to the 7th of May. So it depends. Different subjects demand a longer period of extension or a shorter period of extension, but those particular deadlines have now been made available to the school. So I want students to just to be aware of that that there need not be added anxiety around it. The extensions are in place.
I think I do want to note that it's very heartening to hear that, very important, and I know a lot of students will appreciate that. Do you know, just for understanding, do you know where students can find those deadlines online? Are they available online, where they could find them if there's a student now who's wondering, where could I see this information?
Yeah, well, they have been notified to schools today. I'm going to assume that they're also on the ISSU website, and all of that detail, just to go in, take a look. And also, many of the other questions you've raised as well, the department has lots of information in and around, I suppose, the exams and the announcements as they're made at different times. So it's well worth taking a look at the department website as well, just to keep your hand in and to know what's happening.
Just for anyone listening, we at the ISSU, we will find that information and also put it on our website and our Instagram. So for your own information as well.
Excellent.
Now, as we move on to the return to school, earlier this week, 6th years return to schools, and coming up to the 15th of March, 5th years will be returning. And there's a lot of questions around this, but the first one, high-risk students. It's a worrying time for these, but the department have already put in adapted education provision for high-risk students. It's very important that it caters to them. But a lot of students have no idea what it means or what it is. So if you want to explain that, I think it would help some people who are wondering.
Well, I suppose just in the first instance to say that I appreciate, return to school after an absence can be difficult for many for a variety of different reasons. We're living in a time of challenge in society, so that, we'd have particular concerns. Some may give it no thought at all or consideration going back, but for others it might be a cause of concern, and particularly for those who would be very high risk. So students who are very high risk are being accommodated in that they have particular issues in terms of being very high risk, and so they are remaining at home. They would have remained at home earlier as well in the year, and they are being accommodated by a designated teacher within the school who is ensuring that the work that they need and the continuity and connection, if you like, between the school and the student at home, that is being maintained and that is being nurtured. And that facility, which was there in September, continues now as well.
Thank you, Minister. And I understand if you might not have this detail, but if you do, I think it would help. Say someone who wasn't sure about this or might not be sure if they are classed as very high risk or not. What should they do to start or inquire or start that availing of that process?
Well, in the first instance, that would be a discussion that you would have with the principal, and perhaps, you know, with your GP or whatever the case might be. But your principal would be the first port of call, because he or she would make known to you, number one, they would know your individual circumstances, and number two, if they needed any further confirmation of any queries or any issues that you have raised with them, they would direct you as to where you would go for that information. So I think yeah, in the first instance, I think I would approach the principal if you have any doubt around your status there or whatever. But as I would say, I suppose, Ruben, just to finish, that, you know, many students have done that already, that this has been already operating since September.
That's great. Thank you, Minister. And I suppose to stay on the return to school topic, some students have expressed, I suppose, a lot of worry about returning to school. One point we've heard a lot is, you know, if it isn't safe for 10 people to meet together, or I can't go past 5 kilometers or meet a friend, you know, how can it be safe for me to return to school with possibly 100, or in the case of my school, it was over 1,000 students. You know, how are you going to make that as safe as possible? Because we know there actually is a lot of information around this, but could you just explain maybe to students who are quite worried, which I think is a genuine fear in the world we live in right now, to be worried about such a thing. But I suppose if you could just clarify why the return to school is happening at this point, and the phased reopening, and the procedures that are taking place to make it safe as possible for students.
Mm-hmm. I think that is an excellent question, because I do, as I've referenced earlier, I do think it's very understandable that, you know, as you would look at wider society and you would say, everything else is continuing in lockdown, but schools are reopening. And indeed, even prior to Christmas, even at level 5 level, schools were open when everything else was perhaps stood down. In the first instance, I suppose, to say to you that when schools were stood down in January, they were stood down because there's more than 1.1 million people moving around or circulating when schools are operational. And it was the view of public health and NEFIT that at that particular time we had far too many people moving around, and that it would be a big help to wider society to decrease the amount of people who were moving. So people were asked to work from home. As you would all be aware, you know, businesses were closed, and so education closed, but education specifically closed because of the huge numbers that operate within education. And at that time, the Chief Medical Officer and officials of public health and everyone else was at great pains to point out it was not because there were any issues within the school itself. And you will consistently have heard people say that schools of themselves are places of low transmission. And equally so, you would have heard the CMO and other experts say that the mitigation measures or the preventative measures that have been put in place in schools to protect school communities have been incredibly successful. They have been really stringent, but they have been very, very successful. So I think people would be surprised to know that a budget of more than 600 million was made available to schools strictly for COVID measures to ensure that schools could be safe and could operate safely. And so that meant that, you know, PPE was provided, hand sanitizer was provided, monies were provided. So an additional 4 to 6 hours of cleaning a day would be provided in schools. PPE was provided for buses, staff who weren't available to work because of a particular condition or whatever, that they could be replaced, that additional staff could be put in place from a supervision point of view. So every possible, I suppose, measure that needed to be put in place was put in place. And because of that, the schools are very highly regarded as places of very low transmission. And it is for that reason that when, I suppose, the Chief Medical Officer and the other experts around the table at NEFIT were looking at what could open and when it could open, they chose schools first because education and childcare Number one, I suppose also because we acknowledge how important it is for students to be in school and how beneficial it is to students to be in school. But equally so, there was an acknowledgement that all of the measures that need to be in place in schools are in place in schools, and all of the evidence that shows that when there is an incident in school, schools themselves are of low incidence. But if there is an incident, generally speaking, it comes from wider society. So I think it is a real vote of confidence in the school communities, and all the tremendous work that has been done by students in schools and by the staff that run the schools and everybody that works in the school environment. Just a tremendous level of work on the ground to keep schools safe, so that when they opened, they stayed open. And again, the confidence that the medical experts and public health have in school is that they've allowed schools to reopen on a phased basis. And the phased basis means then that, you know, bit by bit, we're returning to, you know, a full complement of students. So, you know, we began with children with additional needs and on a phased basis, and then the primary schools opened on a phased basis, returning with our 6th year students. And as you've referenced already, Ruben, we're hoping then for the 5th years to come back with the rest of primary school, and then the rest of the school cohort coming back after Christmas. But again, ours after the Easter break. But just to say in relation to that, there's very clear advice that if that is to happen, it means that all of us must continue to be responsible. All of us have a duty when we're outside in the community to do all that we can to keep transmission levels down, to keep our distance, to wear our masks, to, you know, to do what we're being asked to do. But so that's really the position.
Minister, I might just come in with one question. And so you talked about how it's a more controlled environment.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct in saying there's actually reports that are published on the HC website that show how many cases have been shown in schools? Now, they are hard to find, but they are public. And so any student can log on and see the numbers. This is how many tests were done this week. This is how many cases there were this week. Will that continue? And as I understand,
yep, absolutely, 100%. And just to say, even in terms of, you know, resources like that, as I mentioned some of the resources, like, for example, we also have what we call enhanced school teams now working. If there happens to be an incident in the school of COVID-19 outbreak, that we have a public health come to the school. They are supported by staff from the Department of Education, from the inspectorate. There are helplines available to the school. There is any testing to be done. There is a fast tracking of the tests, so that it's a prioritized testing, and equally so, as I say, you know, the resources that are within the schools are also doing, you know, a huge job to ensure that it continues to be a place of low transmission and a very much so a controlled environment.
And I suppose, Minister, the language we use, I think we've noticed during COVID, like, the language we use is so important, particularly when it comes to now public health and COVID-19. And I suppose we've heard the phrases that schools are safe environments. I suppose, like, technically speaking, nowhere is outright safe. As you said, there is low transmission rates, statistically much lower than possibly in the community or in other areas of society. So I suppose it's important is also to recognize that, you know, we followed public health and science all along, and it's important we continue to do that. And I suppose we use the right language, as you use there, like low transmission rates, because I suppose nobody is saying that schools are outright safe. We're saying that they are low transmission rates, and I suppose NEFIT and public health, who've been guiding us all along, have taken the correct procedures, I suppose, to allow for the phased reopening of schools. And if there was to be a situation where they weren't safe, that they would take the correct procedures to also navigate that type of situation. So I suppose we have to have trust as well in NEFIT and in public health, and I think that's really important. In terms as well of just students who, I know from our work in the advisory group that schools, principals and managing bodies have done Trojan work in making these schools safe environments for students. But I suppose sometimes, or possibly, it's just a question, if a school or if a student even maybe didn't feel safe, or maybe felt like certain public health advice or guidance wasn't being followed in their school, what can that student do, or who should they talk to about that? It may not be the school, it might be a student or a group of students possibly who may not be following the guidance.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate, as I said to you earlier, look, there is always going to be, anxiousness, and at this time we're very conscious of what's going on in wider society as well. And I do believe if any student has any concerns, perhaps in the first instance you might speak with your class teacher or the year head, or for example, I'm a huge admirer and supporter of the work of the student council. If you so wish, it could be raised with the student council, and I know there is also a representative teacher then that works with the student council. So there are mechanisms, and what I would say is, if you have any concerns or any anxieties or anything like that, do share it. It's very understandable that people would have concerns about it. Could be the smallest of things, it could be the biggest of things, but all of us are living in this new experience of life and living. And so if you have any concerns, as I say, I would absolutely urge you to students to speak with the class teacher, the year head, or the student council, who do just such fantastic work in the schools and are so reflective really of leadership on the ground by students as well, and it works very, very well, and I've seen it work firsthand myself. So whatever avenue you feel most comfortable with, do choose that avenue, but do speak up, because I think in speaking and maybe in sharing concerns, well then, we can work towards the solutions.
Yeah, I think you've raised an amazing point, Minister, in the fact that I suppose students have seen us as the union advocating and lobbying and working quite hard, I suppose, to achieve the choice that we set out to achieve. And then I suppose it's fair to say that students in your own school, you can create just as much change by talking to your parents, associations, and your board of management and your principals, and doing the same in your school if there's issues arising in general. But particularly at this time, I think when I suppose there is different things going on in schools, and it's important that the student voice is there and it's evidently being listened to on a national level. So that I think can give students maybe some hope and inspiration to work at their school on a local level. We're going to move on now from the return to school area and just move into kind of just general questions we receive from students. The first is, the teacher's estimated grade will go through a national standardization process. That could result in the grade changing. Many students are confused as to what this process would look like and what it will actually do. Could you maybe, Minister, just explain maybe to a student who may have no idea what a standardization process is, just quite simply what a standardization process is and what it does?
Right, thank you, Alicia. I suppose just to go back to, the estimated grade that will be provided by your school, by your teacher in conjunction with the principal. The school gives a particular estimated grade, and then for the standardization process, we are looking at some examples. Would be, for example, the achievement of the class of 2021 in the junior certificate, and that would be combined, as I said, with the teacher's estimate. And then you would also have the subject by subject achievement at a national level for the Leaving Cert over the past maybe 4 years. There would be some, though maybe not, there could be others, but that would be the general idea. But I suppose in the most simple way possible to explain it is that when teachers are assessing their own students, they know their own students well. They understand their students, they have worked with them, they know their students. But I think people would accept that they don't necessarily know the ability or capability of the students in the school next door, or in the school in the next county, or in the school 100 miles away. So that there would be that element of comparability, or the standardization process is brought in. so that, you know, you can compare one with the other, that there's a comparability there. And I suppose also to acknowledge standardization has always been a feature of the Leaving Certificate exam. It's part of the written exam as well. So that's it in its simplest term, but it's an acknowledgement really that, you know, the teachers in the calculated grades process, or the accredited grades process as we call it this year, know their own students best, but it would be very, very difficult for them to adjudicate on students in, you know, different schools, different counties, different places.
Minister, I might just zone in on something you said. You mentioned that junior cert results were taken into account. There is confusion here among students. Students think that their personal junior cert result will change their personal grade. So if you want to clarify that, I think that would be very important.
Yeah, it's the junior certificate results of that group of students, okay, right, from 2021. It is not your individual junior certificate results. It's of that cohort for the class of 2021. And as I say, that's just, you know, that's just one example. There could be others, you know, they could be other aspects. Okay, so we're, as I say, we'd also talk about perhaps the Leaving Certificate achievement subject by subject over a number of years, perhaps 4 years or whatever, of particular subjects. So, you know, they're just examples, but there could be others.
Thank you, Minister. So I'll just repeat for any students, your individual junior cert grades are not going to affect your individual results. It's not the same. Cool. And also, I think it's important to note the reason why there is a standardization process is to avoid overinflation of grades and subsequent points explosion. And so there is a need for it to be there.
There's an amount of balance. Yeah.
But so as we move on to the next part, one group of students who we necessarily didn't cater to as much as we should have last year was homeschooled students, or students who are maybe learning a subject outside of school. This year it is different for them in that they can sit the exams and move on. But there are questions around how will the accredited grades process work for them? Will they just have to written the exam? So in relation to students who are studying a subject outside of school or entirely homeschooled, wondering how this process will work for them. What information or clarity can you provide?
Yes, well, just in relation to those who were outside of school, you would be aware that there were issues around that last year. And I think that, as in every experience in life, there will always be learning. So this year we are very cognizant of the learning from last year and very aware of the learning from last year. So we are currently working on a system where, to the greatest extent possible, all of those who are studying outside of school, that they will be accommodated going forward. Absolutely.
Thank you, Minister. Now, as we move on, that is the end of all of our questions around the return to school and the state exams. I want to convey to any students listening, there are many questions actually coming in from Instagram as we speak. We have a team at the ISSU, we work through them and we take information from the department's website. So we cannot get through absolutely everything. But Minister, there is one question I do want to ask you, and the importance of student voice, you've stressed it yourself. We are also of the opinion that the Student Council is a very important part of schools. But over the past few months, you have been responding to the student voice, to our own lobbying. You have been very cognizant of the need to listen and to see in context of all of the stakeholders. This has been a real positive and important approach taken by the department. And we hope it will continue past these extraordinary times. And so a question is, do you have any plans for the student voice in the future of education? And is it something that you would have been interested in working on during your tenure as Minister?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is an absolutely shining example of best practice of partnership in education, where all voices in education are valued. And I think, you know, from the beginning, since I have become Minister, I have been very, very conscious of the importance of partnership in education. And partnership in education means that you do afford an opportunity and a platform to everybody who has a stake, if you like, in education. And as I said, that does include the parents. It does include the teachers, the managerial bodies, and of course it includes the students. And I certainly will be nurturing that going forward. I certainly, firsthand, I can say that I have seen the value of it. And I think it's important to know as well that, and I think both you and Alicia would be much better perhaps able to articulate this, that around that table there are very different views. There are very strong views, and some of them very much so competing views. But at the end of the day, when there is discussion and there is engagement and when there is conversation, we can always collectively find a pathway forward. It's not always easy and it's not without its challenges, but it is absolutely rewarding when you can see that at the end of the day, all of us can come to, you know, a shared agenda. And I suppose from the get-go, I do want to say that the shared agenda that did exist was that, you know, at the heart of all that we do in education is to serve the students who are in our care. And that's from the very youngest of students to the older students, like the ones you are representing this evening, the Leaving Certificate students. So the voice of the students is an integral, it's a valued and a valuable part of my experience of education anyway. It always has been, and I bring that with me to my ministry, and I certainly intend to encourage that sense of partnership from the widest participation of partnership going forward.
Thank you very much, Minister. So we've now come to the end of our live Q&A. I want to thank the Minister. Thank you very much, Alicia. To any students who are listening, there is a lot of questions we know that still are unanswered. We will be working to try and communicate them. We have teams who are working through the department guidance and trying to put out and answer it on the Instagram. So please do get in contact. We are here and we are working for you. And I want to say, Alicia, is there anything you want to say to close off, or Minister, if you'd like to come on anything? But most importantly of all, I just want to say thank you very much, everyone. Good evening, good night, and take care.
Definitely. I think just to clarify what Ruben said, tonight I hope was a start to getting the clarity students need around the guidance. And I suppose we've taken the biggest step, which is achieving choice. And the Minister was very, very, I suppose, open to listening to the voice of ISSU and to the student voice as a whole nationally. And it just goes to show what's possible with student voice in Ireland and in the world in generally. And I suppose it's important to say that you know, we've achieved something huge, something historic, and there's a lot of questions to be answered, but we will get there. And we're your union, and we're working for you.
Well done. And I suppose just to conclude myself again, just to thank you both for the invitation, and to thank indeed all of the students that you represent. It has been a very difficult and a very challenging time in education, particularly so for the Leaving Certificate class. But I think collectively and individually you've shown tremendous goodwill, determination and resilience, which is so important in this present environment. And I just want to wish each and every one of you well over the coming months with your studies. And as I say, I'm very happy to continue to engage with your representatives, and just, you know, to thank you both and to wish you all well. Thank you.
Now it's off. Sorry.